So my e-commerce brand Neat is doing 1.5 million a year. But here's the thing, it's not my only business. So it means when I'm working on Neat, I need to be efficient with my time. So not long ago, I thought, what if we let AI and Claude take over Neat for a month, doing all of the operations, and then we just see what happens. So, I've been experimenting with Claude Co-work, and I thought this is our way to really put it to the test. So the results have been pretty crazy. So I decided to kind of show you exactly what we did to have Claude run our brand for 30 days. I'll show you the setup, I'll show you what worked, what didn't, what made me nervous, so you can take this setup and try and do it yourself. Because I think these are the building blocks to give you superpowers when you have AI as a co-pilot to really help scale things. So let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about the 5 jobs that I'm handing over to Claude to run our brand. We'll do that by looking at what Neat is like before using AI, before Claude, and the things that we're trying to do, the things we're trying to pull off every day, right? So every day, every week, there's different tasks we have to do, right? So we're looking at ads, we're reviewing ads, we're deploying new copy, new creative. We're also launching emails 1 to 2 per week. So that's strategy, copy, design, execution, and Klaviyo. We're also reaching out to influencers, content creators to get user-generated content or to do partnerships. We're also doing work on the website, from A/B testing on the cart to merchandising of the website. So as you can imagine, you need a human to be involved in a lot of that. There's lots of handoffs, and that's fine if you're kind of doing business as usual. But what about when you want to scale and grow? What about when you want to focus on those big projects, those visionary tasks? It's tough because you're stuck in the day-to-day. So for me, I wanted to move faster, and I wanted to delegate a lot of this work to Claude, to AI, where I'm just approving things. Because that's what changes with Claude Co-work, is that you don't have to do those mundane tasks, but you can still be that checkpoint. So what changes with Claude Co-work is that AI now initiates the work where myself and my team can review and improve instead of having to start from scratch every single time. And that's the big unlock, is instead of doing 100% of the work, we only have to do 10 to 20% of the work. As we get into this, I'm going to show you the kind of step 0, the foundational elements you need to do to pull it off that will make all of this easier. And candidly, if you don't do this, you're just going to be prompting and praying. So it's really about data and systems. So here's the first thing is do you have your project set up so you can actually run what you want? So here's the Neat project. And so we're giving it all the context on Neat, the brand, and what we want to do. But here's the big kind of unlock. If you go into customize and go into plugins, we have spent a lot of time taking essentially what used to be called SOPs and making those into skills. So for example, we have skills on how to run email, from doing audits to deploying flows to deploying campaigns. Same with Bing ads, with Google ads, with Meta, Facebook, Instagram ads. So by having these skills, it allows our team to have superpowers to, with one click of a button, do anything a full stack growth marketer would need to do. And so just want to kind of plant that seed, is that's kind of the pre-work that needs to be done with all of this. So the first place we're going to start is with Facebook and Instagram ads. So like lots of D2C brands, we spend a lot of money on this platform. We're spending $2,000 a day. So we want to watch that money and make sure we're efficient with it. So before co-work, that is a tedious task. Someone on our team goes into the ad manager and they're looking at the campaigns, they're looking at the ad sets, they're looking at the ad creative, they're looking at the copy, they're looking at trends, they're seeing what's working, what's not working, where are we underspending, where are we overspending, and making a recommendation on how we should move money around. Should we increase spend? Should we decrease spend? Do we need more ad creative? I'm exhausted just talking about it. So that's a big time investment, but it's worth it because we're spending lots of dollars, but it's a big one. So with Claude Co-work, we've set it up to basically run a daily audit. That thing we used to do manually, it's now with one click of a button, something that we're able to do. And the main thing I'm looking for is what's working, what's not, and what actions do we need to take as far as moving money around or doing new ad campaigns. So let me show you what that looks like. All right, so what I'm showing right now, this is the Facebook ads dashboard, where normally we're looking at campaigns and then we're going into ad sets and then we're going into specific ad campaigns to really evaluate what's working. And again, we're in 4 different international markets. That's super time consuming. And so for us, the big unlock has been now that we have these skills, we can start to deploy these daily ad audits. And let me show you the output of what we get from that. So what I'm showing now is the daily brief that I get on ads, where I'm getting the kind of summary of like, okay, how much did you spend? How much money did you make? And how efficient is it with your cost per acquisition, your CPA? And then it's breaking it down by campaign so I can see which ones are really driving results and which ones are holding us back. Then from there, this is where Claude starts to give me insights on actions to take, where it's talking about creative fatigue and ad accounts that are a little inefficient. But then on the opportunistic side, ones that are working that, hey, we need to spend more money here. And so this right here is what I care about the most. This is what you should take basically 60 to 120 minutes to come up with this. What is my budget relocation plan? It's like, hey, you're underspending here, push more, pull back on this one. It's a net increase of $0 per day or $100 per day we're going to recommend you spend. And so this is what we've been testing, allowing Claude to make these changes. The other big one is, what are the creative recommendations it would make? So for example, it's looking at the creative and it's saying, hey, this ad campaign with the buy one, get one is really interesting, but we want a new variation of your sweat monster. That should be in the first 3 seconds. It shouldn't be in the body of it. So we're looking at that like, okay, let's start to do that creative. So again, this normally would take us 2 hours that now runs in the background as a Claude routine. So we get this basically in our inbox every morning at 7 a.m. The next task I want to take on with Claude is email and SMS. So that's the big one that unfortunately can be on the back burner because usually ads is the top priority. So before this, our flows, we set them up once. And candidly, we're not giving them the attention they need to be testing, to be iterating, to really diving into them. Also, our email campaigns, a lot of times, like a lot of brands, you're reactive, trying to get an email out for the week. And then plus, you've probably worked really hard to build up your email list or customers, and they've lapsed. You haven't engaged them the right way in a while, so they're just not getting emailed. That meant that our most valuable customers on our list, the ones we worked so hard to get, they're being ignored. And so while we keep spending money to get customers, we're kind of neglecting these ones. But now with Cowork and Claude and doing assessments, we can have a partner that can really be focused on that. So we want to really dive into Klaviyo and understand, okay, how are the flows going? How are the segments? How's deliverability? How's our messaging working, right? How are the campaigns doing that we're doing on a weekly to bi-weekly basis? And tell us the changes we need to make. So let me show you what we did and some of the insights it came up with. All right, so we're in Claude, and where we started was with our plugins. So we really worked hard to have skills to help basically audit email flows in the overall email program. So we ran that skill to start to get insights. And let me show you what it started to come up with. So you can see we had Klaviyo connect to Claude through the MCP connector. So it makes it really easy to get all of the data and the insights. And then we can make this into a presentation, into a Google Doc, to a Slack message. But for this, we made it into a very easy to read Google Doc. And so what it starts to give is the executive summary. Like here's the headlines, basically where to focus, what matters. It looked at the overall platform and deliverability, which I really care about, right? That's kind of step one. Then from there, it's looking at flows. Here's what's good, here's what's bad, what to focus on. And then after the flows, it's looking at campaign performance. And what I really care about is, okay, give me the action items on what to do, from the flows to the campaigns to deliverability to our segment. And so it started to give me a proposed build plan as far as here's all the things we would do, and it put into different tiers. What to fix immediately as tier 1, and then what is kind of second to that. It even gave revenue projections on top of that. And so now I can decide, do I do this manually or do I have Claude execute on this? But for me, the biggest unlock with this task, it's not that it's really saving us time, because it is, but it's actually doing something that we weren't doing to the level that it should have been done. If anything, it was being neglected and pushed off till the next quarter. And that's been one of the biggest unlocks with this. So retention is now something that happens proactively instead of something we reacted to when revenue goes down or we saw that email open rate wasn't strong. All right, and real quick, if you run an e-commerce brand, but you're having trouble growing, that's exactly what we help with at Growth Hit, where we've helped manage dozens of brands scale from 7 figures to 8 figures using the same system that we run on our own brand Neat. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can book a call with us, but let's keep going with this video. The third job that I handed off was creator and influencer pipeline. So before this, we occasionally have to do manual searches to find creators for a brand, right? So it's pretty tedious. You have to create the profile, write the outreach email or message, send it to them. They go silent. You're doing follow-up. So very time consuming. So the result was a pipeline that kept starting and stopping, and we wouldn't hit deadlines. And we constantly be having to start from scratch to build our UGC, user-generated content push. But now that you have Claude Cowork, it's been amazing because we can really give it the profile of the ideal creator we want to find. We then give it access to the different platforms we use for finding creators like Join Brands, and then we have it build a database, build a list of these creators, and then do the outreach and the follow-up all on autopilot. And this has allowed us to not only hit deadlines, but to make this an ongoing machine to have a flood of user-generated content come in. And so let me show you what I mean and how it works. Okay, so what I'm showing here is the prompt in action, where it's going to Join Brands. It's taking the guidance we gave on the different personas, and now it's just trying to crawl through to find the potential personas, the potential creators that can make content for us. And so while it's finding these people, it's then creating a Google Sheet and making a directory or a database that we can look at, that we can then start to say yes or no on who we want to reach out to. And then it does the outreach on its own. So now influencer outreach keeps happening while the team can focus on all the other things we have to do. Ads, email, the website. So it's actually a channel we can count on instead of something we have to start and stop and that constantly gets delayed. All right, the fourth job I handed off was competitor intelligence. So before Cowork, competitive research was kind of a gut feel. It was random. It was when, you had the idea to do it. And what it meant was someone on our team would go look at the competitor's website, look at their ads, and just kind of spend some time Googling around. It was very unsystematized, right? So now that's useful, but it's something that we wanted to make a part of our ongoing strategy to have a 360-degree view of what's happening in our market. So we can really understand where we sit in a competitive landscape when people are looking to buy our product. With Cowork, this allows us to build that system and build that machine because we don't have a dedicated data scientist, much less a data team to pull this off. So what we've been able to do is basically have it look at our top competitors and start to reverse engineer two things. One is, what is our overall go-to-market messaging and positioning? And then second, it gets really tactical on how they're executing that with their funnel. So we're looking at everything from the homepage to the checkout to really understand that. We're even looking at online reviews to see what is the sentiment that people have with a specific company and how it relates to us. So let me show you what that looks like. So first, we started by building a skill within the plugin that looks at competitive analysis, that talks about those two things, competitive analysis, and then overall UI UX analysis across the core funnel. And then you can decide which competitors you want it to go after and look at. All right, so we did the competitive analysis with Claude, and this is what it came back with. It's actually a board-ready deck if we wanted it for that use case, which might be overkill. So it kind of set the stage on auditing all the different competitors in addition to need. So this part's okay, it's interesting. This is where it got my attention, is basically the comparison on the competitive landscape and where we're kind of saying the same thing and where the opportunities are. And so it hit on this idea of a white space, or where messaging and positioning is overcrowded, but also where there's an opportunity to really have a wedge to where we can carve out our own niche in the market. And then it says where we should plant our flag, right? Life-changing emotional aspect. But the part that I really like, it gives specific tactical recommendations to have that messaging come throughout the funnel, from homepage to the product page to the first purchase to the second purchase. And even talk about a testing pipeline of things you could do for social ads and for CRO. So this part got my attention, but now it's about actioning this to put it in motion. So I would then want to connect this with my other Claude skills, the right copy for ads, email, or for the website. Now, the fifth and final job I handed off is probably the one that surprised me the most, that is the biggest unlock, and that's building Shopify features without a dev agency. So before Cowork, any change to the cart, to the website, the checkout experience, really that wasn't like a no-code activity required a dev team, required money, time, required creating sprints for them to get it live, which is kind of a pain, right? Because we're trying to move fast, and now was a bottleneck. That alone was a blocker, and the reason why most companies aren't able to really do A/B testing on their website, or they take too long to update things on their site. But what Cowork does, it actually handles two key components of making updates to the website. First, the new design features are phenomenal for doing wireframes, for doing designs, especially when you connect them to Figma with your MCP. So that's been an unlock, one we've been excited about. But the other component of this is with Claude Code, you're actually able to start writing real code that you can deploy on your website, do QA on with Claude, and take it live. So I'll show you this very specific example where we wanted to test turning our cart into essentially a bundle builder. So when you add something to the cart, talking to you about incentives, if you add more products, you get more savings and more discounts. So it sounds simple, but there's lots of components to it from a dev side that make it a little intimidating because of the tiered structure. I'll show you kind of the origin of how we did it. So first we gave Cowork a brief on what we wanted with the tiers. If they add a product to one, they get a 10% discount. If they add another product to make it 3, it's 15%, and then it's 20% beyond that. So we gave it the logic, and then we talked through what we wanted to actually look like. And this is what it came back with. The other thing on why this first draft worked really well for us is that it already had our brand guidelines, it knew our fonts, it knew our colors, and it understood the checkout. And so here's the first kind of working draft that it did, and it showed the different tiers and what happens from a UI UX standpoint whenever you start to add more products to the cart. So the next phase was, okay, now let's take this live on the website. So we essentially gave Claude Code this tech stack, and we give it access to our backend Shopify. We gave it this mock-up that we're also able to export as an HTML from Claude Cowork to Claude Code, so we could start doing the development on the site. And so once it took it live, we did it in a testing environment. It would then do QA. So it did QA on mobile, it did QA on desktop. We tested it ourselves, and then we could push it live and do a post-launch QA ourselves, and we had Claude do it as well. And this is something that normally would involve multiple parties, multiple time, and a bigger budget that we're able to do with essentially one person and one Claude account. All right, let's talk about the raw results of letting Claude run our brand Neat for 30 days. So first, after 30 days of running the business this way, here are the actual numbers, including the parts that worked and didn't work. So let's actually talk about the time savings. Now, again, we invested a lot in those skills and plugins within Claude to be able to do things. But let's say we exclude that and you already have your infrastructure in place. We're able to save 7.5 days. That's 7.5 business days. We're working 8 hours per day of time. That is essentially over a week and a half's worth of work is done. I mean, you could say maybe people should only work 3.5 days per week, but that was the unlock that we found as far as time saved. But it's also projects that we normally couldn't do that we were now able to do. Now, this time saved is only useful if you can reinvest it into other high impact activities, which could mean strategy for paid acquisition, for conversion, for scaling, right? So that's the other key thing here is what can you do with this free time? But let me dive into these specific results by task. Now let's start with the ad side of things. So remember how I had basically Claude give recommendations on what creative to do? Well, it did. It gave us these creative ideas after basically looking at our ads, looking at competitors and saying what to do. So let me show you these two ads real quick. And again, these were made within Claude with our Nano Banana connector. So this is one where it kind of shows all the options you try that don't work until you use Neat. And then let me show you this one as well. This is one that was made that talks about, hey, usually you're wearing black because that hides pit stains the best, but now with Neat, you can wear colors. So how are these two ads performing? Well, again, our cost per result goal, our cost per acquisition goal is to be under $40. This one's at $28 and this one is at $15. Again, it's 10 purchases. We'll see if it scales, but I call that a win, and no one touched these ads. This was Claude doing all the work. Now let's move over to email and talk about a couple things here. So one big insight was around this campaign we're doing for a buy one, get one offer, and it recommended doing a flow. So we stood up a flow and the results were pretty insane because this sign up rate was already at 20%. And instead of just kicking them to the discount, it's like, let's nurture them in under 48 hours. This got us $3,600 with an average revenue of 70 cents per email, which is essentially just found money from this recommendation. So that one is also a win. Now let's go to the website. So remember how we talked about making that new cart with Claude and Claude Cowork? This is the buy more, save more final functionality that went live. Whereas you add products to cart, you start to see the savings that you get at 10%, 15%, and 20%, and then free shipping. And so the big thing is, will this lift conversion rate? Will it lift average order value? So what we found is conversion rate went up 47% on this one, which is super exciting. We'll see if this holds. We'll see if this can sustain because we did do some email launches during this time, but we will take that. And then on the creator side, the pipeline finally started producing actual conversations instead of just one-off sends. So UGC is what we turn into ads. So every additional creator conversation eventually gives us more creative to test, but we need a longer time horizon to see how that one really worked. Now, let's talk about the parts that maybe underperformed or were underwhelming because not everything worked. The competitor intelligence outputs, they were accurate, but I didn't end up acting on them as much as I expected because the action step from a teardown is still a judgment call. And I want to make that myself rather than just blindly handing that off. Also, a couple of the email re-engagement sequences, they didn't really move the needle and it didn't truly understand how we're using OpenSend compared to our other email tools. So that was a little frustrating because we hit a little bit of a dead end. But overall, the brand held. And not only that, but we found wins we might not have found before. We did ads we wouldn't have done before that actually had a better efficiency, right? We saw the conversion rate go up a little bit. So, now we have this new system for running a team. We have the AI-enabled system, and then we have the old way. And it's a matter of finding that kind of in between. So I wasn't able to all of a sudden hand over the reins and jump from 1.5 million to 3 million. And anyone selling AI that way, I would be very cautious of it. What it did though was reset how we work inside our business to get stuff done. And that reset is actually what creates room to focus on the important things. So I feel like AI is this huge opportunity to find leverage in the business because it's taking away that work you maybe don't need to do so you can focus on high impact tasks and strategy. But again, it's a lot of work to set this up, but once you have it set up, that's where it gets really exciting. Now, if you want us to come in and look at your brand and find maybe the biggest opportunity for growth, as well as helping you build an AI system like this one I just walked through, then book a call. There's a link in the description, a book, and you can talk to myself or Emma. And on that call, we'll look across your whole funnel and really figure out what's working and what's not. We'll look at the ads, the website, the emails, retention, your overall offer, and try and figure out what's that lever you could pull, what's that constraint you could remove to get to that next level. So again, you can book a free call by clicking the link in the description below. And if you want to see exactly how I myself went from freelancer to scaling to mid 7 figures a year, then check out this video. Would love to show you kind of my journey so you can avoid some of the mistakes that I've made.